Our aim is to make the science behind food more accessible and easier to understand. So our vision is of a world where people live healthier lives because we all know how to. As such, our mission is to provide engaging science-based information to inspire healthier and more sustainable diets and lifestyle choices. As part of this, last year we launched our own food waste awareness campaign through social media channels called A Science-Based Hacker Day Keeps Food Waste Away, a 30-day journey to reduce food waste at home. This campaign consisted of practical food waste tips that were posted daily and engaging challenges that I will describe later. We also conducted a review of the literature to examine which techniques have been effective in information-based campaigns on food waste reduction. We wanted to share the insights from this review and learnings from our campaign so that others can also benefit from our research and experience. So the reason why we are focusing on information-based campaigns rather than other types of food waste reduction interventions is because, being the European Food Information Council, our modus operandi is information-based. Information-based campaigns can be awareness campaigns, communication campaigns, education programs, etc. When it comes to food waste interventions, information-based ones also happen to be the most widely used, perhaps because they are easier and cheaper than other types of interventions, such as changing people's choice environment or changing policy. However, information alone is relatively ineffective at changing behavior. But information-based campaigns can be made more effective by tailoring the information and delivery to the target audience you want to address, targeting behavior change processes such as strengthening motivation, engagement, and commitment, and combining information with other strategies. In order to know if your campaign is truly effective, it is also important to assess whether it worked or not, so that future further food waste reduction endeavors can be improved. And lastly, collaborating with others can help you to increase the quality, outreach, and impact of your intervention. So this diagram shows that there are numerous opportunities for people to engage in behaviors that influence how much food waste they generate. These occur throughout the 5 stages of food consumption, from planning, purchase, storage, preparation and serving, and consumption. So planning consists of monitoring the food people have at home, planning what meals they will eat for the week, and creating shopping lists based on their existing food inventory. Purchasing includes following the shopping list and buying fruits and vegetables that may not be cosmetically perfect, but are otherwise still good quality. You will notice that some of these behaviors are ones that can also increase food waste, such as buying food impulsively or buying food habitually that you following habits that not necessarily adhering to consuming, and also buying more that you might need. In terms of storage, these processes can include storage to reduce food waste, such as freezing, whether people consume food in time, whether they interpret date labels correctly, or whether they store food for too long under suboptimal conditions so that it spoils before they can consume it. Processes involved in preparation and serving that influence food waste include preparing the right amounts of food, and if people prepare too much or serve too much food that is not in line with their preferences, this can also lead to food waste. Also, this might include unnecessary waste during preparation, such as throwing away parts of the food that are still edible when you're preparing it. In terms of the consumption stage, what we want to see is that people consume food straight away and that they store and use their leftovers instead of throwing it away. So here you'll see that there are some behaviors that we want people to increase, indicated by the green arrows, and some that we want them to reduce. So it's important to make this distinction because just focusing on the positive behaviors, such as following a shopping list, may not necessarily discourage people from performing negative behaviors, such as buying more than they need. So what ideally we want to do is focus also on reducing the negative behaviors. In the next part of the webinar, I will give you some background on how consumers relate to food waste, so we can better understand how to influence them on this issue. So we're here today because we know that food waste is bad, but there can be a lot of cultural variability in the extent to which consumers are aware of this as well. For example, in a recent study by Hanging House, they found that although most people in France, UK, and Canada realize that food waste is bad for the environment, by contrast, less than half the people in the US were aware of this. So, although many people realize that food waste is problematic on a global level, they tend to downplay the role of food waste in their own lives. This might be because there are other competing goals that they prioritize. For example, if they prioritize health, they might throw away food that they feel could make them sick. If they're short on time, they might find it preferable to throw away parts of food that they could otherwise prepare and store and consume later. And if they prioritize pleasure, they may prefer to discard food that they don't like to eat. These decisions make it easy for them because the negative consequences of wasting food or the benefits of preserving or consuming food are not impactful enough for them to change their ways. So we also know that consumers tend to care more about saving money than the environment when it comes to a lot of their food decisions, including food waste. And so this also influences the types of food they tend to discard. That is, they tend to discard cheaper food. However, how people feel about food waste is not as predictive of their food waste behavior as their daily habits and routines. Barriers such as wanting to be a good provider, not having enough time, not planning enough, can get in the way of efficient usage of food. Furthermore, consumers already think that they do a lot to reduce food waste and that there is not much more they could do to reduce it, and that makes them feel not capable of doing so. So research has shown that those that feel more capable tend to produce less waste. Lastly, as food waste is a collective problem, many people don't think that their own behavior will have much of an impact on the food waste problem. This means that consumers need support to feel capable of reducing their food waste. In a study by Kamecki and Fischer with German participants, they found that these people want support for meal planning, they want support to create shopping lists, they want feedback on their own behavior to see if that their behavior is making a difference in terms of reducing food waste or helping them to save money. And they want to be able to share with others about their experiences related to food waste. A study by Hanging House that examined consumers' food waste behavior in the UK, France, US, and Canada showed that there is some cultural variability in the factors that are associated with food waste behavior, meaning that where possible, interventions should be tailored to the specific cultural context they will be used in. For example, families with kids tend to waste less food in the US than those without kids. But this trend is reversed in the UK. Having a full-time job is associated with more waste in Canada and the UK, but not in the other two countries. Also, you might think that those who are more concerned about the environment should waste less food, but this association was only found in the UK. Certain food storage skills, willingness to consume leftovers, and reliance on taste to determine food spoilage is also associated with less waste in some countries, but not others. Yet, we see that there were also some commonalities between the 4 countries. For example, the most common reason for food waste people reported was that food spoiled more quickly than they expected. Also, across countries, food waste was associated with the younger demographic, so younger adults from around 18 to 34. And it was also associated with a reliance on expiration dates and using food appearance to determine whether the food has spoiled. Now I will present some recommended campaign strategies based on our rapid review we conducted of the literature. So perhaps the most important recommendation, which should guide your selection of other strategies, is to tailor your campaign to your target audience. So let's take the example of younger adults, as they have been found to waste more food compared to other demographics. Research has shown that a major reason for this is that compared to older adults, younger adults lack food management skills that influence food waste, such as shopping, cooking, and consuming leftovers, and knowing what the correct portion size is. They are also at a life stage where their ability to plan ahead is still developing, and we know that planning is a big component of food waste prevention. So knowing this, campaigns have targeted informing people on how to identify whether food past the best before an expiry date is still good to eat, and to focus on helping people to gain food management skills. It's been recommended that learning food management skills should already occur at a younger age, so that by the time that these children are young adults, they are already well equipped with the knowledge and skills to be able to reduce food waste. So we see that people can vary in how prepared they are to deal with food waste reduction in terms of their skill level, but they can also differ in other ways with how engaged they are with food waste reduction, such as in terms of their motivation and behavior. According to the Transtheoretical model of behavior change, people go through several stages of psychological development before they would change their behavior, starting from the pre-contemplation stage of not having yet considered changing their behavior. Here, people don't yet have the motivation to enact change, but this motivation might be triggered by making people aware of the extent of the food waste problem and the environmental, social, and economic consequences. But as we saw from the previous slides on cultural differences, this strategy can only be expected to have a limited effect, depending on their existing level of awareness and how much they care about the consequences of food waste. Thus, another strategy is to frame food waste reduction in terms of achieving other personal goals, such as saving money. So once people are thinking that there are some arguments for them to reduce food waste, they enter into the contemplation stage of being open to the idea of reducing their food waste. Here, the relevant barrier is that they may not know how to, or they may not think it is feasible for them to reduce food waste. So this barrier can be removed by informing people about how to reduce food waste in a way that makes them feel capable of performing the behavior. This is more likely to happen when the first behaviors that they're presented with are relatively easy and effortless. Then, when they move to the next stage of performing waste reducing behaviors, their engagement can be increased by incorporating social elements into their food waste reduction experience and asking them to declare their intention or their commitment to reduce food waste. After they have performed some food waste reduction behaviors, the next step is for them to enter into the maintenance phase, where they keep going with the existing behavior and may even increase their range of food waste reduction behaviors. The idea here is that over time, the behaviors will become so habitual that there should be fewer barriers to performing them. So, as I mentioned, people's goals of food safety, saving time, and eating pleasure may get in the way of them reducing food waste. In EUFIC's materials, we addressed this by showing how reducing food waste can also help people to achieve other goals, such as avoiding getting food poisoned and saving money. In other campaigns, such as the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign, from the organization WRAP, Waste Resources Action Program, also frames some of their messages in this way in terms of saving money. In terms of helping people to to fulfill the goal of their eating pleasure, some other campaigns also present people with tasty recipe ideas for using leftovers. So, research that EUFIC was involved in shows that actionable information about how to reduce food waste strengthens people's intention to reduce food waste, whereas presenting information about just the consequences of food waste doesn't. Actionable information teaches food management skills, and when presented clearly and is not too difficult, it makes people feel capable of reducing their food waste skills. So in EUFIC's food waste campaign, we did indeed find that actionable posts had more interactions, including saves and likes. So here is an example of the types of actionable posts we have on helping people to identify which molds that they should be wary of and which fruits and vegetables can be stored together, how they can reuse rice in other recipes, and different ways of reducing food waste. We also found that the information is most effective if the message is simple. Here, EUFIC tried to inform people about which fruits and vegetables can be stored together depending on their ability to produce ethylene gas and their sensitivity to ethylene gas. And we received a few criticisms on social media that our way of presenting this information was difficult to understand. So taking this on board, we keep learning and adapting from feedback and research to better develop our information materials for our campaigns. For people who are relatively new to reducing food waste, it is better to give them tips for easy wins to begin with, as this makes them feel that they're making progress, which in turn helps to increase their motivation. In previous research, consumers have indicated that they would like opportunities to be able to share their food waste reduction experiences with others, so making it more social. So the ability to do so, having more social interactions, also helps to strengthen the social norm that food waste reduction is a socially accepted behavior. So there are a number of ways that we increased social interaction in our campaign. We used polls, such as asking people their opinion on certain food storage facts. We had a recipe challenge where people shared recipes with others through social media channels, and they also shared meal ideas. And this was quite popular among the participants. But other ways that we targeted social norms. So in one study by Schmidt, 2016, consumers were given information about how other people also reduced food waste. For example, 75% of shoppers avoid wasting their salad by keeping it in the fridge. In EUFIC's social media campaign, we worked with multipliers, that is, people who have their own following on social media, to help spread the message among their network about food waste reduction. So through their interactions with others on social media, people are able to share their experiences of reducing food waste, and this enforces the social norm that people in general are collectively working towards this goal, which makes people feel that it makes people not feel so isolated in their influence. Another technique to increase engagement is to ask people to make a commitment to reduce food waste. So in the study by Schmidt, this involved having people tick a box saying that they intended to reduce food waste. In another study by Young et al., they had representatives of their campaign in a supermarket spreading their food waste message to consumers, and they asked those customers of the supermarket to sign pledges to reduce their food waste at home. So once people are motivated and engaged with reducing food waste, other types of practical support can kick in to help it easier for them to perform their food waste behaviours. So as mentioned previously, one common reason people produce food waste is that they forget to eat their food before it goes bad. So prompts or reminders for people to save or consume their food can help. For example, in a study by Stockley and others, displaying reminders for people to take home their leftovers in a restaurant helped the restaurant to reduce their food waste. Because people's memory is already overcrowded, linking the prompt to a particular time or activity or place can help. For example, putting a doggy bag prompt in a restaurant is going to make it easier for people to act on the information than if you put it at a bus stop. So the prompt to eat leftovers is also likely to be more effective when it's put on the fridge than when people just read it online. So a way that asking people to put their prompts in areas that is most likely to help them is another action they can take to help reduce their food waste behavior. People also want tools that can help them make difficult food waste reduction tasks easier to perform, such as planning what to eat. For example, in a New Zealand version of the Love Food Hate Waste campaign, they distributed free seasonal meal planners and recipe books to help families shop for, cook, and eat nourishing and affordable food. So with the nourishing and affordable aspect, you see how they aligned food waste reduction with the other priorities people had. And by the way, K is the Maori word for food. In our EUFIC campaign, we had a food waste bingo in which we challenged people to see whether they could create a bingo with the food waste behaviours they had performed. So this is a fun way of having people set goals for food waste reduction and to monitor their progress to see how many behaviours they had performed or accumulated over time. And these techniques of goal setting and goal monitoring have been shown to help people to achieve their goals. So now that I've described various strategies that can be used in a food waste campaign, I would like to move on to talking about how to assess the impact of your campaign. So depending on the aims and the nature of your campaign, there are a number of aspects you could look at in your impact assessment. The first is, are people aware of your campaign? For example, if you have a campaign that you want to release onto the public at a large scale, you might be interested to know whether you're reaching a good number of people and whether your campaign is memorable to them. This will allow you to know whether you are using the right channels to reach your audience, whether your campaign is registering with people, and whether you can justify the cost of your campaign, the scale of the impact of your campaign, and how efficient your campaign is. Once you have identified the people who are aware of your campaign, then you can assess their understanding of it. Do they interpret your campaign messages correctly? Does it increase their understanding of the food waste problem and its implications? And does it increase their understanding of how they can reduce their food waste? If people have understood your campaign correctly, then you can see how it influences their judgment about food waste reduction. Is it making people feel like they should reduce their food waste? Does it make them feel capable of doing so? And does it increase their intention to do so, for example? And most importantly, we want to know whether people are acting on your campaign messages. For example, does it increase the desired behaviors that your campaign is targeting? And does it reduce the undesired ones? Does it ultimately reduce the amount of food people waste? So, in order to really know the impact of your campaign, you need to compare how people who are exposed to your campaign or not, who are exposed to your campaign, differ from those who are not exposed to your campaign. So I will refer to the non-exposed group as the control group. So you need to make sure that these two groups are either unbiased, meaning they're randomly allocated to be exposed to your campaign or not, or that they are matched on characteristics that are expected to influence the outcome. such as socio-demographic characteristics. Because if you have more younger people in one group, for example, then this might not allow you to see the real effect of your campaign. And you need to measure the aspect that you are interested in before the campaign and after the campaign in both groups of people. That way, you are sure that any difference between the groups is really due to the campaign and not because the two groups started off being different in how they relate to food waste in the first place. So now I know that in many cases it's not feasible to follow all these guidelines, but there is an alternative workaround. So the gold standard of measuring impact is through a randomized controlled experiment design, where you randomly assign who gets to be exposed to your campaign and who doesn't. But if you want to implement your campaign in real life, it's not really possible to randomly assign some people to be exposed to your campaign and others not. So what you can do in this case is to perform a quasi-experiment where you first categorize whether people are aware of your campaign or not after your campaign has been implemented. Then you try to match the people in the aware group to those in the unaware group on characteristics that could influence your campaign's impact, such as age, gender, socioeconomic status, family composition, etc. Then when you measure your aspects of interest, instead of having the pre and post campaign measures, your participants report how they perceive the changes on the target behavior over the same period of time. So for example, how much, if they think they reduce their frequency or the amount of food they throw away. It's worth noting, however, that the conclusions with the quasi-experiment will not be as robust as those of the randomized controlled experiment, because there could be critical pre-existing differences between the two groups, that the groups that were aware and unaware, that you cannot pick up on or that you cannot match, such as maybe people who care more about food waste might be more likely to be aware of your campaign. Now, one of the outcomes you're going to want to be measuring in your impact assessment, if it's possible, is the amount of food that is wasted. So if you have direct access to people's actual food waste, then you can measure food waste by weighing it, assessing its volume, or being even more meticulous and separating the edible bits from the rest of the food waste that is inedible, like peels and food packets, and weighing the edible part. As scientifically laudable as this approach is, it also has the downside of being more expensive and really only feasible with a smaller number of responses within a close geographical area, like the area of a town or a cafeteria or a campus. And it doesn't cover food waste outside of the place where you're measuring. So it doesn't pick up on the food people waste where they go somewhere else. It doesn't pick up on the food people throw down the drain or the toilet, but it's still considered more accurate than indirect measures and less likely to contaminate the behavior of participants as a result of you measuring the food waste, rather than the result of your campaign. So if you're not able to directly measure people's food waste, you can ask them to estimate their food waste through surveys or to record their food waste on daily intervals, or you can look at public food waste reports. And here I have a reference for a validated scale of a self-report measure of people's food waste measurement that could be used in a survey. So the problems with the self-report measure is that the diary, although it's a bit more accurate than a survey because people are recording their food waste on regular intervals, it's also more tedious for people to carry out. So it can lead to more dropouts from your impact assessment. And although self-report measures tend to be less reliable than objective measures of food waste that I mentioned previously, this issue of unreliability can be minimized by having a control group not exposed to your campaign also estimate their food waste. Alternatively, you could ask people to weigh their own food waste and to provide the weight information. So now that I've given you information about targeting different audiences, what strategies you can use, and how to measure food waste, I'd like to show you some examples of how other people put these elements together to create some effective information-based food waste interventions. So this was a primary school intervention in Portugal that resulted in a 33% decrease in food waste from main dishes in a school cafeteria between baseline, so that's measurement before the campaign, and 1 week after the campaign or intervention. But after 3 months, the children's level of food waste went back to their usual level before the campaign started. And you can see that the campaign was quite intensive and comprehensive because it targeted awareness of the food waste issue, the consequences of it, and it really got children involved in thinking about the reasons why they waste food and to think of solutions. The intervention also had them create food waste reduction messages and to display them at their school canteen. And it even rewarded people who did not produce any waste with a gold sticker. So another example is at a university setting where we see how effective a simple prompt can be in a university cafeteria with the message, eat what you take, don't waste food, and reduced people's food waste by 15%. However, a more elaborate message that talked about the consequences of food waste did not have an effect beyond this simple message. So which further reinforces the principle of not making your message too complicated. So here is a household food waste intervention launched in Canada called Reduce Food Waste, Save Money, which follows the idea of framing food waste in terms of people's personal goals, in this case, saving money. Here, households who received the intervention were presented on tips on how to reduce food waste through planning, efficient shopping, storage, preparation, and leftover use. So all the 5 stages of food consumption that I talked about before. They were also presented with tools such as freezer stickers to encourage them to freeze their food and keep track of their food, and a grocery list pad so they could plan their shopping. They also received prompts in the form of emails. After 2 weeks of this intervention, the 54 households who were exposed to it had a 31% decrease in curbside garbage. So the researchers weighed the garbage, whereas the control group who did not receive the intervention actually increased their garbage by 1%. Here we have another household intervention in the US this time that is comparable to the previous one in terms of the content that was provided and the size of the reduction that they found. However, it differed from the Canadian study in that the participants were provided with the content of the food waste tips in various formats, such as podcasts, videos, infographics, etc. And the participants reported that they most appreciated the podcast and video formats. This intervention also trained participants to weigh their own food waste and log this daily. So what you will notice here is that in contrast to the Canadian study, this study did not have a control group that was not exposed to the campaign. So the impact measure here is based on the difference in people's food waste before and after the intervention in the same group of people. So this intervention in a retail setting was a collaboration between RAP and the UK supermarket Asda, who launched their food waste campaign via an e-newsletter, a social media campaign, and a magazine. As with the other successful campaigns I previously described, they focused on giving tips to consumers on what they can do to reduce food waste at all the 5 stages of food consumption. However, the social media campaign also had a social interactive component that asked customers of the supermarket to submit their favorite recipes, and the e-newsletter also linked to the social media campaign and provided extra links to storage items that customers could purchase. So in this campaign, in order to examine differences between the groups who were exposed to different channels, they classified participants according to whether the participant reported having seen the campaign in one or more of the delivery channels. So it also included people who said that had not seen the campaign. They found that participants reported reducing their food waste 5 months after the campaign compared to 1 month before the campaign if they had seen the e-newsletter, the social media campaign, and even if they had not seen the campaign. But seeing the campaign in the retailer magazine did not affect their behavior. It's interesting to note that even the group that was not exposed to the campaign reduced their food waste over the same period of time, suggesting that the fact of asking people about their food waste behavior at the baseline may have influenced them to be more conscious about reducing their food waste, thereby they reported reducing it less after the intervention. So the previous studies I described were consisted of collaborations between researchers and stakeholders related to the intervention setting, such as schools, a retailer, and in the household intervention, the collaboration was with the local council, who could also advise the researchers about details related to garbage collection. So, as you can see, conducting an effective campaign involves lots of different types of skills, knowledge, and resources. And it's only through collaboration that all these can be optimized. Furthermore, collaboration can increase the outreach of your campaign and allows it to affect people in more settings, thereby increasing its impact. So affecting more people through more channels in turn strengthens social norms and can help remind people about the importance of reducing food waste. So in EUFIC's campaign, our collaboration with influencers helped us to reach more people through dissemination through the multiplies existing networks. And we realized that the key to making this collaboration work is to co-create the material with the other stakeholders. The campaign needed to fit their agenda in order for them to be fully committed to promoting it. So a good resource for finding potential collaborators is the EU Food Loss and Waste Prevention Hub, which showcases the work of various stakeholders on food waste. So you can take inspiration from the work others have done to see what worked or didn't work for them. And you can see whether there are particular gaps in the food waste reduction landscape that should be addressed, and how what you want to do may also align with the agenda of other relevant stakeholders. You can even find some of EUFIC's campaign materials in this database. So just by using the filter awareness campaign here in the EU Food Loss and Waste Prevention Hub, you can see that among other activities, there are campaigns implemented at schools, trade fairs, advice to local governments, and descriptions of activities that are happening at a country level. And there are also organizations that encourage collaboration, such as RAP, whose Love Food, Hate Waste campaign started out in the UK 15 years ago and is now implemented in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. So on their website, they provide free research-based materials and invite others to distribute it while tagging them via their social media channels. So because this campaign targets young adults, they chose the social media channel because it's popular with this age group, and it focuses on teaching them food management skills, which they lack. So one of the nice things about this campaign is that it's a year-long campaign, which gives people more chance to build up food waste reduction behaviors into habits. Because we saw with one of the previous studies in the Portuguese setting that after a few weeks, people's food waste reduction behavior went back to what it was originally before the campaign, suggesting that they had not had the chance to repeatedly perform their behaviours until it became a habit. So you can see with the wrap campaign that they also try to engage people by having a different theme each month and aligning food waste reduction with other lifestyle factors and personal goals of the consumers. So, in summary, designing an effective campaign starts with knowing who your target audience is. So, the approach you take with children will be different to the approach you take with young adults, which might be different from the approach you would take if you're collaborating with restaurants to target their customers. So, based on this, you can choose which behaviors you want to target, how you should frame your messages, and through which means you should deliver your campaigns, and the types of stakeholders, collaborators you could consult or work with. And to make the most informed decisions, you should find out all you can about other interventions that are related to what you want to do, whether it's because they use the same target audience, or they're conducted in the same country, or they are similar types of interventions to what you have in mind. So there's so many resources out there that can help you with this, from Google Scholar to the EU Food Loss and Waste Prevention Hub. And to know whether your campaign has really made a difference, measure the campaign outcomes and report them, whether it's on your website, through the Prevention Hub, or via journal publication. Even if your campaign isn't effective, as we have seen sometimes is the case with other published studies, in some respects, the learnings from your campaign are going to help other people to improve their food waste reduction activities. So I hope this webinar has provided you with some actionable tips and tools to help you feel more capable of conducting an effective information-based campaign. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.